SIMRAN Singh here on the Rebel Road. We are in Austin, Texas at a Quaker meeting house. And the one thing that is very beautiful about Quakers is that they understand the art of listening. They are set up in a way that they honor each and every person that sits in the space, understanding that there's no hierarchy, but it is a space to share intuition, to share inspiration, and to share ideas for the greater common good. I'm really excited to have a panel discussion here today. The topic I was invited to discuss happens to be execution. But as we know from some of the previous panel discussions, the topic starts out in one place and it meanders where it is necessary to go. So I invite you to really listen, to really allow what bubbles up from within you to bubble up, and to take note of what these people have to say. These panel discussions are designed so that you not only listen to a deeper conversation, but you allow yourself then to gather people around you and continue this conversation. So I invite you to do so, and I invite you to share this video with other people so that they meet many strong voices, many beautiful hearts doing their work in the world as rebels on the road. I'd like to introduce my panel. Timothy Patrick Miller is an award-winning voice actor, narrator, and principal performer of the American Listeners Theater. He has won the Audio Publishers Association's Audio Award and was recently selected for the AudioFile Magazine's Earphones Award, honoring his 3-volume collection, Timothy Patrick Miller with Ambrose Bierce, telling tales of civil warriors. His onstage roles are an incredible range. He was the voice of the Red Cross messages of hope after Hurricane Katrina. In the gaming world, he is known as the Admiral Dane in the Nintendo Meteoroid series. You can find his link below, and you'll find more information on all of these panel guests in the next issue of 1111 magazine. My next guest is Laura Pressley. She's a 25-year Austinite, entrepreneur, semiconductor engineering professional who holds a PhD in chemistry from UT Austin and is a former Austin City Council candidate. Her community involvement includes serving on boards such as Women's Advocacy Project, Safe Place, and has appeared on the CBS Early Show, Good Morning Austin, and has testified as a citizen's advocate to the City Council and the Texas Senate and House. My next guest is Wayne LaChapelle. His background is in finance, and he's worked at senior levels around the country. He was the CFO of a public company in Houston that had revenues of $300 million, and he also raised $16 million in capital for growth companies across the U.S. Wayne consults companies and investors on becoming conscious capitalists, as well as being an intermediary to assist in raising capital for conscious companies from conscious investors. He believes it's a necessary step away from our capitalistic system, having the ability to form sustainable companies that build sustainable communities and then sustainable economics. My next guest is Ted Norris, MD, PhD, reared in Corsicana, Texas, as an East Texas fundamentalist Protestant. He received a BS in English Lit before his MD and PhD in endocrinology, the pineal gland. His radical holistic practice was inclusive of a libertarian candidacy for state senate, which attracted more voters at that time than any state campaign had previously for a third party. He places at the forefront the spiritual, physical, and mental goals held sacred as a right for individuals' relationship with their own bodies. Turning later to an environmental focus, he organized grassroots, permaculture, and bioregional course events and groups, eventually deciding that limiting myths and histories designed to disempower us were central to our personal and cultural inertia. My next guest is Gary Freeborg. He works in the field of sleep electrophysiology at the University and Government Research Labs before he moved into his passion for the land, which led him to work by day for one of the oldest and most respected native plant nurseries in Texas, the Lowry Nursery. He was involved with all aspects of native plants and animals, habitat restoration, organic gardening, environmental interpretation, and nonprofit fundraising. He and 2 brothers acquired land and began exploring organic and biodynamic agriculture, growing native trees, produce, and mushrooms. He's the vice president of the Texas Organic Farming Research Center. His company, BioDiversity, offers large and small landowners a wide variety of revolutionary strategies to bring vibrant health back to the land and increase biodiversity in soil, plant, animal communities through consulting, education, and research. My next guest is Leah Chapelle. She's an impassioned facilitator of the Great Awakening of humanity. She's among the proactive ground crew anchoring in the new paradigm as a speaker, author, internet talk show host, and awakening coach in Austin, Texas. Her live internet radio show, Unzipping Reality, The Third Awakening, is heard on TalkShoe.com. And her book, Unzipping Reality, 11 Steps to Create the World We Want, is available on fearorlove.com. She is bringing people together and building oneness in the local and global community. Last but not least, Kathleen Burke. She was born and educated in Connecticut, migrating south in '93 to continue her community relations career, now with the Salvation Army. She moved to Scotland to become a member of the Findhorn Foundation, an international spiritual eco-village and retreat center. Upon returning to the States, she served as a resident friend in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Today she enjoys writing, poetry, and facilitating small ceremonies in Austin. I'd like to welcome you all to the Rebel Road panel discussion, and thank you for being here. And I'd like to start this discussion, first of all, by the subject of listening, that is such a strong foundation in the Quaker meeting houses. So whoever would like to start, I'd love to hear your perspective on listening and how important that is, especially now when we have so many problems that are appearing in our world.
Well, I could say something about that. I'm a Quaker. But from the Quaker perspective, I think that listening is more listening to yourself than necessarily listening to what's happening outside or to other people. So you just start with yourself, and that can be a challenge sometimes.
Well, as a voice actor and audio actor, I'd like to jump in there too, because listening can be made into two categories, one of which is conscious listening, on purpose listening, looking for awareness in our listening. When that starts for us, absolute universes of wonder open and we're well on the path. The other kind of listening is kind of what I'm addressing in my audio theater. I say on a poster someplace, theatrical catharsis, what did I say? Catharsis, ecstasis, Americana, selective to individual listener at no additional expense. A little medicine show twinge, but every single word there expresses the power of intention behind words, that these vibrations will come out in the audio directed sphere and get into the human brain of the listeners, where in some books that some of us have certainly read, I'm thinking of becoming, my favorite page in that is where, I think it's page 90, where they refer to, no matter how brainwashed and propagandized we are, when we are able to trigger certain keys and or triggers within our brain, within our heart mind, suddenly the propaganda can fall away and there's a snap into awareness that we often experience in other ways. But that seems to me to be a very exciting kind of work to do. And I'm concentrating on Americana because I think this is where the final land of the breaking through to the new paradigm has been designed to happen from the get-go, frankly. So,
I would just like to say that I had some input on the selection of this esteemed panel. And my criteria had quite a bit to do with listening. Those people who are able to share the stage. And I'm just looking over the landscape of these brilliant people that I know, and they have a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and perhaps are not able to share the stage. And so who you see before you are people that know how to play well with one another.
Such an important quality. Yes.
The thing I like about listening is that it demands two stages of our what our growth has to begin to encompass. The separation conscious, which I love, and I think we should celebrate. Vive la différence, you know. Until you can recognize the difference, why you got those people won't be valuable out there. They'll just be not me, and we won't know what it is. But when we can recognize both a separation and a oneness, then there's value, because that person's me also, but it's a different perspective. It's a different point of view. And the listening makes that connection between the oneness, the unity, and the separation consciousness, which should be celebrated and glorified.
Absolutely.
Here,
You know, you came to my show, and in all my shows, I help people to understand there really is nothing out there. So Kathleen, when you were talking about we need to listen in here, there's nothing really out there to listen to anyway. And it is that voice that's willing to speak out from in here that says, I want to create a new world. I want to create a world that isn't. And we allow that to happen. And actors do that on a stage. When they're creating a story for someone to hear something, they're not really hearing it from the outside or seeing it on the outside. It's because it resonates on the inside. And that happens throughout nature. It happens throughout all the different paradigms that we have, whether it is permaculture or politics or art or history or any of those places. Gary, talk about, because you work so much with nature, talk about the way nature listens to itself, how it really grows itself because it is in such union and communion. It is in that oneness that Ted talked about that we can't seem to quite get to because we are so separate, even in the beauty of that separateness.
Yes, the union, the oneness that we talk about is what it's all about. And in nature, there seems to be just a smooth sailing into that. And everything is so interrelated. We can't even begin to understand all the connections within nature. And so that's one of the tenets of permaculture is to just mimic what we see in nature, ecological patterns and movements, and just try to mimic them because they're working in a way that is just so profound underneath. And when we start going into ourselves and quieting down this mind and all these things and can listen to one another and be in unity with one another and can listen to the environment around us, whole world's open. Like
Absolutely.
Jim said.
Yes. Laura, I want to bring it to politics because you've been active in that. You've been an activist yourself. And when we look at the world of politics, it seems like we're wanting to be listened to, but we're not quite sure if we are being listened to. We're not quite sure of even where the laws are going or how they're really being, whether they're being forced upon us or whether they're being enacted for us. Can you speak to a little bit of that?
That's a very good point. You know, it's been said that about 20% of communication is verbal. So when you're talking to a group of people or one-on-one with somebody, they're also speaking to you with their body language. And that is a little more subtle communication. And there are just some general kind of behaviors that people do. You know, everybody knows when you cross your arms, you're kind of closing up and you're getting defensive. There's some other ones that are really interesting. When people touch their nose, there's a physiological thing that happens in your body where you're uncomfortable with what's being said, and so people touch their nose. It's kind of the Pinocchio story. It actually has a lot of, you know, all these kind of childhood stories really have some basis in reality and basis in biology. So people will touch their nose, and it's kind of like their nose is growing. You know, maybe they're uncomfortable with what's being said. Maybe they're not speaking the truth, or they're unsure of what you're saying to them. So these are things that I monitor on just constantly with people when I'm talking to groups of people, or when I'm talking one-on-one with, you know, council members, or if I'm testifying or whatever. And then I try to adjust what I'm saying, either back off or move forward, go faster. And so I think we as human beings and as spiritual beings, we have to be very sensitive to the spiritual being we're speaking to. We may not agree with them. They may be an opponent who we need to have tolerance for. And just being very sensitive to how they're responding. And it is our responsibility, in my opinion, for someone else to hear us. We have that responsibility. And so when we're lobbying our city council for different aspects of something we don't like, we have to say it in a way that they can hear us. And in some cases, you have to dress like them. If you go to city council and you dress in, you know, dreadlocks and you know, boots where, you know, your clothes aren't really professional looking, there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to look in yourself, how best can you communicate and get what you're trying to do across to that person, because it's so important. You wouldn't be there if it was not important. So you have that responsibility to ensure they hear you. And however best that human being can hear you, it's our job.